At the height of the 1990s supermodel era, Yasmeen Ghauri was untouchable. With her striking beauty, fierce walk, and presence that could silence a room, she ruled the runways of Paris, Milan, and New York. Designers like Gianni Versace, Karl Lagerfeld, and Jean-Paul Gaultier all wanted her. She graced the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. The fashion world saw her as the next great icon. But then, just when her star was burning brightest, she disappeared. No scandals. No farewell tour. No dramatic interviews. Yasmeen simply walked away from it all. One minute she was everywhere, and the next, nowhere. Fans were left wondering what happened. Why would someone who had everything, beauty, fame, and fortune, choose to leave it all behind? Behind the glamour and flashing cameras was a woman many knew little about. Quiet. Private. Deeply spiritual. Yasmeen Ghauri never seemed entirely comfortable in the spotlight, even when it loved her. There were whispers that she never felt like she belonged in the fashion world, that the pressure was suffocating, that something more meaningful was calling her. But no one really knew for sure. This is the story of Yasmeen's rise to the top, and her mysterious, graceful exit from it all. A journey from a strict upbringing in Canada to the runways of Chanel. A life caught between cultural expectations and global fame. And a choice few dared to make at the peak of their success. So what really led her to walk away when the world still wanted more of her? Was it personal? Was it spiritual? Or was she simply done playing a role that was never truly hers? Her story begins here, but the answer is still just out of reach. Yasmeen Ghauri was born in Montreal, Canada, in 1971, to a Pakistani father and a German mother. Her upbringing was strict, especially under her father's watch, who followed traditional Muslim values. From a young age, Yasmeen stood out, not just for her beauty, but for the quiet intensity she carried. She was tall, with strong, elegant features, and eyes that seemed to tell stories without saying a word. But growing up, she was often teased for looking different. In school, her background and appearance made her feel like an outsider. Fashion was never the plan. In fact, it was something she kept far from her thoughts. That all changed when she was discovered at 17 while working at a McDonald's. A local hairdresser saw something in her that the world would soon recognize: star power. At first, Yasmeen's parents disapproved. Modeling didn't fit into the life they'd imagined for their daughter. And the industry itself, full of late nights, bold photo shoots, and fast-paced chaos, clashed with everything she'd been raised to believe. But Yasmeen took the leap. She moved to New York, signed with a top agency, and within months, her career exploded. Suddenly, she was walking for Chanel, Dior, and Versace. She became a muse to top photographers like Patrick Demarchelier and Steven Meisel. Her unique look, a blend of Eastern and Western beauty, was in high demand. But behind the glowing magazine covers and front-row seats was a woman who remained guarded. Yasmeen didn't chase fame the way others did. She showed up, did her job with precision, and quietly left. She rarely gave interviews. She wasn't interested in being a celebrity. And that made her even more fascinating. As her fame grew, so did the pressure. Endless flights, brutal schedules, and the constant expectation to be perfect took their toll. She kept smiling for the cameras, but those close to her began to notice the shift, the tired eyes, the long silences, the feeling that she was drifting. Some said she started asking deeper questions about her purpose. Others believed she was battling an internal conflict between her public image and her private beliefs. And then, at the height of it all, she began to pull back. No announcement. No drama. Just a slow, graceful disappearance from the scene. The world kept spinning, but Yasmeen was no longer on the runway. Why? That part still remains in shadow. As the fashion world continued to obsess over Yasmeen Ghauri's flawless walk and ethereal presence, those closest to her could sense a storm brewing beneath the surface. She was everywhere: Vogue covers, Versace campaigns, walking the most prestigious runways in Paris and Milan. But the more visible she became, the more invisible she felt inside. The Yasmeen that smiled in front of the cameras wasn't always the same woman behind them. There was something deeper going on, something unspoken. Whispers from inside the industry started to spread. Some said she was quietly struggling with the constant judgment and pressure to maintain her image. Others pointed to her spiritual side, the side that didn't quite fit in with the world of flashing lights, revealing outfits, and fierce competition. There were times she would disappear from events, skipping after-parties or leaving fittings early. Not out of arrogance, but exhaustion. Mentally, emotionally, maybe even spiritually. Even as she reached supermodel status, Yasmeen remained a mystery. While her peers like Naomi Campbell and Cindy Crawford embraced fame and media attention, Yasmeen kept her distance. She didn't like interviews. She never chased movie roles or talk show appearances. Her beauty was undeniable, but her focus seemed elsewhere, as if she was only visiting this world, never fully part of it. A few photographers described working with her as magic, but also fragile. She could light up a lens, but between takes, her mood would change. Some days, she was introspective, lost in thought. Others, she was restless, anxious, almost uneasy. Modeling had given her success, but not peace. In a world that demanded constant reinvention, Yasmeen didn't want to play along. She wanted space. She wanted silence. There were rumors that she was feeling the weight of her cultural identity. That straddling two worlds, her traditional upbringing and her modeling fame, had taken a toll. Friends recall her questioning whether she was honoring herself or simply performing for others. Was she being celebrated, or just consumed? The tension was no longer just external. It was personal, internal, and growing louder. And even though her photos continued to sell, Yasmeen Ghauri was slowly slipping away, one step at a time. The world saw her shine. But no one saw what it was costing her. By the mid-90s, Yasmeen Ghauri was standing at a crossroads, one that few could see, but she felt deeply. On the surface, her career was still soaring. She had just walked for Valentino, landed another high-profile campaign, and her face was on magazine covers around the world. But inside, she was quietly withdrawing. The tension between who she truly was and who the world expected her to be had grown too heavy to ignore. She had built a career in an industry obsessed with appearances, but she was craving something real, something lasting. Backstage, her presence had changed. She used to be focused, composed, ready. Now, she seemed distracted, as if her mind was always somewhere else. Makeup artists noticed how little she spoke. Fellow models said she would sit alone, headphones on, zoning out. It wasn't attitude, it was distance. A kind of emotional curtain she was slowly pulling between herself and the world. Fashion had given her a platform, but it never gave her peace. And Yasmeen, always more grounded than the spotlight allowed, was beginning to see that clearly. Offers were still coming in. Major designers wanted her in their next shows. Editors begged for interviews. Brands lined up, waiving contracts. But for the first time, Yasmeen wasn't saying yes right away. She started skipping big events. She passed on campaigns that would have made headlines. The industry, known for chewing people up and moving on, began to whisper again, "Is she okay? Is she done?" People around her didn't have answers. Because Yasmeen wasn't talking. Not to the media, not even to close friends. She had become a ghost in her own story, floating between two worlds, one of fame and fashion, the other of reflection and escape. The pressure to choose was closing in. She was being pulled in two directions, one toward the life she had built, the other toward the life she had quietly dreamed of, one far from the noise. Her silence only added to the mystery. Everyone had a theory, but no one really knew. Not the designers. Not the fans. Not even those closest to her. She was there, and yet somehow already gone. Something was coming. A final decision. And when it came, it would change everything. Just when it seemed Yasmeen Ghauri was quietly fading from the world that had once worshipped her, something unexpected happened, an offer that no one, not even Yasmeen, had anticipated. It wasn't just another fashion campaign or runway show. It was an exclusive deal from a luxury brand that wanted to make her the face of their global rebranding campaign. A multi-million-dollar contract. Complete creative control. A chance to redefine what it meant to be a supermodel on her own terms. The industry buzzed with excitement. Could this be her return? But for Yasmeen, the offer didn't feel like an opportunity, it felt like a test. If she accepted, it would mean diving back into the very world she had worked so hard to step away from. Yet, if she turned it down, it would be the clearest sign that she was truly done. For weeks, she went silent again. Not even her agent knew what she was thinking. There was talk that she had retreated into total privacy, spending time with family, reconnecting with her faith, and questioning whether fashion had ever truly served her or just consumed her. Then came the second twist. Just as conversations about her comeback heated up, someone from her past resurfaced, an old friend from before her modeling days. A person who remembered her not as a supermodel, but as Yasmeen, the girl who used to walk home from school quietly, who dreamed of becoming something more than just a face. That friend, now a journalist, had begun writing a piece, an intimate profile about Yasmeen's inner conflict, her dual identity, and the spiritual struggle that had followed her throughout her rise. Somehow, private details began leaking. Whispers of emotional breakdowns, strained family relationships, and spiritual guilt made their way into industry circles. Suddenly, the comeback story was no longer just about fashion, it became personal. Rumors swirled that Yasmeen felt exploited by the very world that had once praised her. Others said she was preparing to speak out, not in a glamorous interview, but in her own quiet way, a book, perhaps, or a letter to the next generation of girls chasing the dream she once lived. Some insiders believed she had recorded a video diary during her final year in the industry, a raw and honest look behind the camera. But no one had seen it. Not yet. The stakes were rising fast. If she chose to return, she'd have to face the industry, and herself, under a brighter, harsher light. If she stayed away, the silence would continue, but the mystery would only grow. And the pressure wasn't just external anymore. It was personal. Emotional. A lifelong tug-of-war between being seen and being true. The world was still watching, waiting for her next move. But Yasmeen, as always, wasn't ready to play by anyone else's rules. And the question lingered heavier than ever, what if her biggest decision hadn't even been made yet? And then, without warning, Yasmeen Ghauri made her decision. She turned down the massive campaign offer, the one that could have catapulted her back into the center of the fashion world. No press release. No official statement. Just a quiet rejection sent through her agency. She had chosen her peace over the spotlight. Her silence spoke louder than any runway walk ever could. The industry was stunned. People who had waited years for her return suddenly realized she wasn't coming back. But Yasmeen didn't disappear completely. A few months later, a surprising development took everyone off guard. A small independent publisher quietly released a book, not a memoir, but a deeply personal reflection. It was written anonymously, but the voice behind the pages was unmistakable to those who had followed her journey. The book spoke about identity, belonging, and the quiet pain of living a life for others. It talked about fame, beauty, and the fear of losing yourself in the process. There were no names. No direct references. But it was clear, this was Yasmeen's truth. The final twist, though, came tucked in the last few pages. She revealed that while the world had been waiting for her next move, she had already made it. She was living a completely different life, out of the public eye, focused on raising a family, studying, and supporting young women struggling to find their place between culture and ambition. She had found a kind of fulfillment that fashion never gave her. And she didn't regret walking away, not once. The woman once praised as one of the most beautiful faces in fashion had found her true self far from the cameras. It wasn't a fall from grace. It was a quiet victory. Yasmeen Ghauri didn't vanish. She simply chose to live on her own terms. And while the world may never see her on a runway again, her story of strength, choice, and quiet rebellion still walks with us. Yasmeen Ghauri's story didn't end in a blaze of paparazzi flashes or a dramatic final walk down the runway. It ended quietly, on her terms, in a way that stayed true to who she had always been: private, thoughtful, and deeply grounded. The fashion world moved on, as it always does, chasing new faces, new trends, and louder headlines. But Yasmeen's absence left something behind, a question that still lingers: what does it truly mean to have it all? Her choice to step away from fame wasn't a rejection of success, it was a redefinition of it. For years, the modeling industry had praised her for her beauty, her grace, and her unforgettable runway presence. But Yasmeen had always wanted more than just admiration. She wanted authenticity. She wanted peace. And most of all, she wanted to be free from a world that never quite saw her for who she really was. In her later life, she found meaning in ways that couldn't be captured in photographs. Away from the cameras, she raised a family, embraced her faith, and supported others in quiet, meaningful ways. She didn't need the spotlight anymore, she had found something brighter within herself. The young woman who once felt out of place in both her culture and the fashion world had grown into someone fully at home in her own identity. For her fans, Yasmeen remains an icon, not just for her beauty or fashion legacy, but for the courage it took to walk away. In an industry that often demands more than it gives, she made a different kind of statement. She reminded us that success isn't always about staying visible, it's sometimes about knowing when to step out of view. Her story is a rare one. It's about strength wrapped in softness. About choosing self-respect over validation. Yasmeen Ghauri had it all, and then she chose herself. And in doing so, she left behind not just a legacy in fashion, but a message that still resonates: real power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it whispers, and then walks away.